Here is a field of tobacco, a commodity whose sweet-smelling, enjoyable-tasting smoke has contributed to man's pleasure for centuries. One of the major sources of wealth to the early American colonies, and now the basis of an industry that ranks with wheat and cotton in monetary value. Until recent years, the cultivation, processing, and manufacture of tobacco were almost entirely an art. And the artist? The veteran tobacco man, skilled in the growing of tobacco and the earlier, simpler techniques of processing and manufacturing. A man whose father and his father before him had spent their lives learning how to make tobacco produce a better smoke. That is all that a man's five senses could teach him. But as the industry grew, larger crops, larger markets, modern transportation, all the complexities of a rapidly growing industry taxed his ingenuity in solving new problems. This great change in perspective had been brought about by the introduction of the new American blended cigarette, combining varying amounts of flue-cured, Burley, Maryland, and Turkish tobaccos. With this change came a more discriminating smoker, demanding a milder product of greater uniformity. Thus, the tobacco man felt the need of a sixth sense which would enable him to control quality from seed to cigarette, the sense of science. This was the situation when the American Tobacco Company embarked on its research program. Beginning with a survey of the literature such as existed at that time, the program grew steadily until, in 1939, this modern research building was constructed to accommodate its expanding activities. Today, this building, housing America's finest cigarette laboratories, is staffed with some 60 trained specialists. Here, extensive studies are made of the four main types of cigarette tobacco, each differing in physical and chemical characteristics, and each producing smoke of different composition. For example, flue-cured, high in carbohydrates, low in nitrogen, yields more acids in the smoke. Burley, by contrast, more bases, factors which influence aroma, taste, and palatability, but cause irritation if not balanced. Within these four types is an enormous number of variations, resulting from differences in variety, soil, cultural practices, climatic conditions, and stalk position. To formulate a balanced blend, these differences must be evaluated for every crop and each locality. Out of this grew the American tobacco system of pre-purchase analysis. Experienced tobacco buyers make a survey of farms in all tobacco-growing areas, selecting representative samples of tobacco, which they forward to the laboratory. Here the samples are received and recorded, and the tobacco prepared for analysis. These samples are evaluated, and within a matter of hours, reports are on their way back to buying supervisors by wire, phone, and mail. The tobacco buyer, armed with this confidential information and his own ingrained experience and judgment, goes to auctions like this better equipped to procure tobacco of the required characteristics. At the laboratory, the job has just begun, for even with scientific selection, wide variations from crop to crop dictate constant inventory and analysis of stock on hand. For example, here you see tobacco being analyzed for nicotine and other volatile bases. After steam distillation, the total volatile bases are determined by titration. The nicotine in a fractional part of the distillate is precipitated with silicotungstic acid, the precipitate filtered and ignited, the residue of silicotungstic oxide cooled and weighed. The result is indicative of the total amount of nicotine in the sample. Other criteria of quality for which tobacco samples are analyzed include sugar content, proportion of ash, total and protein nitrogen, and many others. In addition to the selection and blending of tobacco, rigid standards must be set on all materials used in manufacture. This, for instance, is a photoelectric device for measuring the opacity and whiteness of cigarette paper. Here you see a test of the bursting strength of the paper. Cigarette paper is a very special paper composed of purified flax fiber and pure precipitated chalk. Wrapping materials undergo rigid tests for purity, impermeability, and numerous other characteristics. This one, a stiffness test for foil, assures sturdy packages. The control exercised by the laboratories extends to all branches of manufacture. Regulation of humidity and temperature, in addition to contributing to the sanitary conditions in factories like this, is essential due to the nature of tobacco. The nerve center for this moisture control is again the laboratory, which is in constant touch with all factories, conducting moisture tests like this, which are run on samples of tobacco from every stage of manufacture, and also checking the instruments used in all factories for proper calibration. Scientifically supervised manufacture of this nature helps produce a finer finished product. And from every production line in every factory, from store counters all over the country, representative samples are sent to the Lucky Strike laboratories. Here, predetermined standards must be met, physical as well as chemical. And with respect to physical standards, the laboratory found itself frequently in uncharted waters. Its engineers were called on to design and build testing devices not available from regular instrument makers. This one, a cylinder which tosses the cigarettes back and forth, determines tightness and stability, ensuring against loose ends. Here, a microfilm projector is adapted for measuring width of cut of tobacco. This instrument was designed to measure resistance to airflow, making sure your cigarette puffs freely and easily. And this one, similar in principle as well as appearance, tests the moisture-tight seal of the cellophane jacket. All these tests are based on criteria developed in experimental research, and new standards of quality are constantly being added, because this experimental research never ends. This is a mechanical smoking machine which closely reproduces conditions of human smoking. Careful quantitative studies of the composition of smoke collected by this device led to the establishment of standards of quality, and indications are that continuing research will reveal new criteria and suggest even better methods for quality control. Here, for example, are experiments on the isolation and identification of the ingredients in smoke and tobacco that contribute to aroma. And here you see a Van Slyke apparatus, which is being used to investigate the changes which occur during the aging of tobacco. Recognizing the need for basic research on the physiological aspects of smoking with emphasis on irritation, the American Tobacco Company in 1935 established a research grant at the Medical College of Virginia in Richmond. Facilities such as this biological laboratory were provided for collaborative investigations. Today, in the factories, at the auctions, and on the farms, you will find the tobacco man practicing his art as in the past, but with one big difference. Backing up and guiding his every move is a sixth sense his father never had, the sense of science.